Okay, my name is Bill Toll, I'm your EAP manager, actually it's / work-life manager now. They're putting more stuff under the tent, right? But we all have that, right? Okay, thanks to efforts by my HR manager, Pat Healy, and Dr. Lester from Medical, we're having this presentation this morning on purposeful productivity. Now, Dr. Shields here, Rick Shields, is the founder of Balanced Living, Inc., and he holds a doctorate degree in psychology and also has degrees in nutrition and is a certified nutritionist. He's been doing corporate training and training in the federal government and other levels of government for over 20 years, and he has lots of networking throughout the EAP community, both locally and nationally. And I think we've about said enough. And the other thing is that he doesn't know about this yet, but he age regressed in the posters in the prelude to coming here. And now this is the real version. Okay, give you Rick Shields.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to thank Bill for his efforts, his logistic efforts in setting up the seminar and giving me directions and prepping me a little bit. I want to just thank the technical people who are filming today. And of course, I want to thank you for taking time for your very busy schedules and coming. Anyway, I'd like to just start off with a little story. The story is about a person, a young woman who went into a local library. She took out a book, and she promptly went back the next day and returned the book. Told the librarian it was the worst book she ever took out in her life. It was an awful book. And the librarian was a little bit curious and said, well, what was wrong with the book? So the woman said it had too many characters and no plot. So the librarian turned to her and said, so you're the one that took out a telephone book. Okay. That was my icebreaker. Every speaker needs an icebreaker, and that was mine. Okay. Anyway, I'd like to get started today just by talking a little bit about your EAP, Employee Assistance Program benefits. You might know it as Work-Life, Magellan Work-Life Services or Solutions. And how many people are familiar with Work-Life Solutions? Anybody? Magellan? EAP, benefits? Okay, for those of you that aren't, I know Bill will chime in when I get stuck with some of the benefits, but you have a contract, you have certain benefits as employees, and basically the work-life program, the EAP program, is there to assist you. If you're having any kind of personal difficulty, personal problem, emotional problem, substance abuse, whatever it is, you can get confidential counseling that's available to you at no charge. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is a household benefit also. So anybody who lives in the home, anybody that's having any kind of personal problem that they're having difficulty dealing with can get confidential help. That's only one side of work life. There's also another side. There's something called a non-clinical side. The non-clinical side is there just to make life easier for you. For example, if you have a parent living 1,000 miles away in Chicago, an elderly parent, that may need a geriatric evaluation, you can get that done for them. They'll send somebody to the home, they'll do an assessment, they'll give you a little report in terms of what kind of services might be necessary. So that's another very valuable tool, is the elder care service part of the EAP. Child care, information. In other words, if you're looking for a resource, you can get that through EAP. So there's a lot of services available to you, and I encourage you to either call the toll-free number if you need more information or want to access the program. There's also a website, and I'm sure Bill can help you with any other details about that program. Anything else you want to say?
There's also some other new developments. For example, if someone's seeking help with weight management, you have like a personal coach kind of thing, and you just sort of sign up for it. Also, I think Rick briefly mentioned there's a financial consultation thing that you can access now, where if you're reasonably well prepared going into it, you get them your information, they can give you feedback in terms of your financial planning, which would be much like the seminar that we're going to have next month. But, you know, they'll work with you, go back a couple times, back and forth, and then give you some written recommendations as to what you might be thinking about doing in terms of your financial strategy. Also, I would encourage all of you to actually go to the site and sign up and get a password. If you go around, you don't necessarily end up on the FAA site, and we have more benefits than lots of other folks, so you would miss whole sections of what's available. All they get out of you going in there is a head count. No information is stored on the computer as far as what people access. And there's tons of stuff on there that wasn't there as short ago as 2 or 3 years. And the whole section for supervisors, resources, stuff on the orders, but also, you know, advice on certain kinds of situations. It's much more fruitful now than it was in the past, so please do take advantage.
Also, one other service there is the legal service. You can get a legal consultation with an attorney. I believe it's a free half-hour consultation. If there's any ongoing legal counseling you need, it's available at a discounted rate. So if you haven't put together a will yet, or estate planning, or whatever you're interested in doing, you can get some legal assistance as well. So this is all under the umbrella of the Work-Life Solutions EAP program. Okay, why don't we get started? Everybody should have training materials in front of them, which are yours to keep. Hopefully you have some pens to write if you want to take notes. There is also an evaluation form that you may have picked up on the table, which we need you to fill out at the end of the seminar. We'll give you a few minutes to fill that out. We're going to scroll down so those of you can follow along on your handouts, or you could look up on the screen here. We're going to start with that middle slide. To be early is to be on time. Okay. Before we get to that slide, I want to talk a little bit about the program today, which is basically a time management program. When it comes to time management, everybody in the room is really on equal footing. What do I mean by that? Everybody sitting here has the same exact amount of hours in the day, 24 hours. It's not like somebody has more or somebody has less. Some people get more done, not because they have more hours, they just may manage their time better. And that's what we're going to hear to find out more about today. Time management is a skill. And by the way, I want to get the audience involved a little bit, so feel free to participate. What do we mean by a skill? Can somebody tell us, what is a skill? Anybody? Go ahead. Yeah.
Something that you're good at.
Something. Okay, good. Something you're good at. Anybody else want to define a skill? We have lots of skills. What is it? Something you're good at? Anybody else? Okay, a skill, very simply put, is something you learn how to do. If you learned how to drive a car, you have the skill of driving. Okay, so a skill is anything that you had to be taught how to do. You can't put somebody in a car or in a plane and tell them to fly or drive if they never learned, right? So it's a skill. And believe it or not, managing your time is also a skill. It's something we have to learn how to do, and even though we're already doing it, we hope that through this training today you may pick up some other tips or strategies that may help you to be more productive and be able to manage time more effectively. Some people say time is money. Others say time is life. As your time goes, your life goes. When we look at this slide over here, this slide, which talks about to be early is to be on time, to be on time is to be late is to be dead. The slide is really communicating what kind of value we put on our time. Now, I just want to mention that if somebody takes a loss in the business world, that loss one day could be offset the next day by a windfall profit. Right now the stock market is down, but down the road that market could be up, and it can offset whatever loss a person is experiencing right now. Isn't that true? Yes. However, when it comes to time, any time that's been wasted can never be retrieved. Any time that's been lost can never be regained. It doesn't work that way with time. So time is really the most important asset that we have. So I just want us to keep that in mind as we go through this training. Now, despite all the time management techniques we have today and all the time-saving devices, high-speed computers, fax machines, voicemail, text messaging, microwave ovens, faster transportation than we ever had before. What do you hear about most people? What do they tend to say? Most people will tell you, I just don't have enough time. So is all of this technology working for us or against us? What do you think? Is it placing more demands on us? Is it, okay. I know when I grew up, not to date myself, but I had one phone number. That was it. The average person today has got about 5 numbers. You got a fax number, you got a cell phone, you got a business phone, you got a personal phone, you got an email address. There are many, many ways that we're impacted, confronted with technology, and there's a lot more we have to process today and deal with. I remember coming back to my office many years ago. I'd have a phone answering machine and have a certain number of calls, but now I got to check a lot of different sources to find out who I need to communicate with. It's not just a phone answering machine anymore. So the world has become more demanding and a little bit more difficult to manage sometimes. I don't think anybody in the room, though, is going to give up their cell phone. Am I right? I don't think anybody's giving up their computers too fast. I don't think anybody is giving up on the technology. The only thing we have at our fingertips is really to try to learn how to manage things a little bit better. And I'm hoping through today's training, we are all going to learn some skills, or possibly just reinforce skills we already know, but maybe we're not doing. So I'm hoping that's what we're going to try to accomplish today. Again, if there are any questions or comments or advice that you can give us in terms of what you personally do to better manage the technology, the time, productivity, please let us know, because we're all here really to learn together. Okay, let's take a look. We're going to move on a little bit. We'll go down to maybe the next slide there, if we could. And you can follow along. There's some learning objectives. Again, if you can't see it on the board, on the screen rather, you're welcome to move up forward or just follow along in your handouts there. Okay, so we have some learning objectives. And what I'd like to ask you is the following. How many people here in the room would like to be world famous? Just raise your hand. Anybody want to be world famous? Nobody in the whole room? Nobody. Not even one person? Okay, amazing. Okay. How many people here would like to be multimillionaires? Multimillionaires. Okay, believe it or not, Bill, I still didn't get every hand up for that one. And I want to tell you something. I just want to tell you that if you didn't raise your hand, I'm assuming you already completed that goal. Okay, so anyway, if you didn't raise your hand to that one, that's okay. There was a show on 2020 or 60 Minutes that said virtually everyone that won a lottery ultimately wound up penniless, so it might not be the best thing in the world also. But my goal is to get every hand up. So the next question I'd like to ask you, how many people here would like to live healthy and happy lives? That works all the time. Healthy and happy lives, you get every hand up. Well, believe it or not, the program we're doing today has a lot to do with the health and the happiness of our lives, because if we don't handle or manage time properly, it can add a lot of stress onto us professionally as well as personally. So, and stress, the doctors and the scientists tell us, could affect our health. So we're actually going to hopefully be more relaxed after the seminar, because we'll be able to manage our time more effectively, and that could enhance our health, quality of our life, our happiness, and so on. So let's keep some of these things in mind. We may have to make a conscious effort to be more productive, but I think in the long run, it might mean more time for yourself. How many people can anybody here honestly say that they are as productive as they'd like to be? Yeah, a question or a comment? Oh, you're as productive like to be, okay. Okay, very good, okay. See, so some people can actually say that.
Is there anybody who would question if I have?
Not with that head button.
Okay. So we can see, some people do feel they are as productive as they'd like to be, which is great. And by the way, we're going to talk more about that in a minute. What I'm going to ask you to do right now, before we go further, I'd like you to find some paper to write on and just jot down some of your time wasters. What are some of the things during the day, either on the job or off the job, that you feel waste your time? So please jot down a few things there. See if you can come up with at least a half a dozen or so time wasters. And hopefully as we go through, we'll see if we can come up with some solutions to those time wasters. But I want you to identify personally some of your time wasters. Think of some on-the-job time wasters as well as maybe some off-the-job as well. Okay. After you've done that, I'm going to ask you to do one other thing. I'd like you to write the word habit, H-A-B-I-T, on a piece of paper and come up with your own definition. What is a habit? So just jot down, make believe you have Webster's dictionary next to you, and you're going to give us a definition of what a habit is. Just a few words or a sentence, don't get too elaborate. I want to see how you define the word habit, and I'm going to ask maybe some volunteers just to read off what they jotted down. Okay, we'll give you another 5-10 seconds. Okay, who can help us out? Somebody just raise your hand and give us, go ahead, gentleman over here.
Repetitive action.
Fantastic, repetitive action. Let's think about that for a second. Repetitive action, good. What else is a habit? Yeah.
A routine.
A routine, so we got routine, we got repetitive action. Any other way to describe the concept or the idea of a habit? Routine, repetitive action, anything else? Yeah.
Something we customize ourselves with doing.
Okay.
Doing enough. Pretty much a legal version of their short definition.
Okay, good. Something we accustom ourselves to do. Anything else you can think of? Okay, repetitive, routine, yeah.
A repeated way of doing things, not always that flexible.
Okay, not flexible. Basically what a habit is, it's subconscious. We do it without thinking. It's an automatic reaction. It's routine, it's repetitive, it's reflexive. It's almost like a knee-jerk response, right? Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to ask you to do a habit. I saw this demonstrated many years ago by a woman named Ilana Rubenfeld, I think, called the synergy method. I'm going to ask everybody here just to do a habit that we all have. Fold your hands. Just fold your hands in front of you. Clasp your hands. Okay? Now, did anybody have to think about how to do that? No. It's automatic. It's routine. Sometimes you're sitting with your hands folded, you're not even aware of it. Keep them folded for a second. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is put the hand on top. Put the thumb on top that's normally not on top. Reverse the way you fold the thumbs. How does that feel? A little strange, a little uncomfortable? Okay, let's try another habit. Just fold your arms. Okay, this is another example of a habit. Many times you're sitting with your arms folded, you're not aware of it. And now what I'm going to ask you to do is reverse the way you fold your arms. Put the arm on top that's normally not on top. If you can't do it, we'll let you stay anyway, don't worry. How does that feel? Different, strange, almost like they're not your arms around you, right? So can somebody tell me, what did you do? First of all, I apologize if I just added any stress to your lives. Those exercises, I know you already have enough, but anyway. Can somebody here tell me, what did you just do that made you feel different, strange, or uncomfortable? What just took place?
Changed my behavior.
Changed your what?
Changed behavior.
Changed behavior, good.
It wasn't subconscious.
Wasn't subconscious, you had to think about it. Very good. Basically, what you just did, very simply put, you just broke a habit. You broke a routine. You changed the way you normally fold hands and arms. That's changing or breaking a habit. And it led to a certain level of discomfort. But what happens if you continue to fold the arms this way for the next couple of weeks? You get used to it. That becomes the new habit. Can anybody in the room here make a connection between the topic we're talking about today and this concept of habit? What's the connection? Somebody draw a bridge for us between this idea of habit and this whole area of time management. What's the connection? Yes?
We're trying to work differently than we normally do.
Very good. We have certain structured habits in place in terms of how we spend our days, how we spend our time, how we spend our lives. And what we're really asking you to do, I think this is really the focal point of the seminar, as we go through, I'm asking you to evaluate or bring up into your consciousness your typical habits, your routines, your time management routines. And only by drawing it up into your consciousness, you're going to be able to change those time management habits that may not be productive. Now, granted, everybody sitting here has time management habits or skills that are working, that are good. But we can all benefit by re-examining some of the habits we have in place regarding time management and see if we can learn some new things. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide, which is called multitasking does not equal productivity. Now, I could just tell you, just for full disclosure, my doctorate degree is actually in nutrition. My undergraduate degree is in psychology, but in any event, I could tell you, I am a healthcare professional in private practice. I do manage and run my own office with a very small support staff, very small. But in any event, multitasking, the pendulum has begun to swing the other way. For many years, the time experts were telling us that if you want to be more productive, you have to know how to multitask. But now the pendulum is swinging the other way. And this, the way I could relate to it in my field is that for many, many, many years they told us that margarine was better than butter. Well, margarine was, good. If you're concerned about heart disease and cholesterol and so on, but we all know today trans fats, which is pretty much what margarine is made out of, isn't so good for us. So we can see many times, regardless of what your nature of work is, things change, ideas change, concepts change, and many things are proven wrong over time. This is one of them. At least many time management experts are believing that it's better to slow down and you'll accomplish more instead of trying to overwhelm yourself and do too much at once. Multitasking can lead to burnout, and anyone who burns out is not going to be productive at all. So pacing yourself, slowing down, being more organized, focusing, taking time to relax a little bit, in the long run will make you more productive than trying to overwhelm yourself and so on. So that's one of the things we're learning about multitasking. Let's run down very quickly some of these other concepts on the slide here. We will go back to them. Categorizing your work. Many people are overwhelmed about the amount of work we have to do, but it really has to do more with defining the work that's in front of us. So once we're better able to define the nature of the work that's in front of us, it may take on a new perspective. Okay, we have big picture versus little picture. Productivity should mean meeting your goals, not just scratching something off of your to-do list. Just because you're scratching something off of that to-do list, that doesn't mean you're being productive. How many people here feel a sense of accomplishment when they cross something off of that to-do list? Raise your hands. Okay? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're being productive. You are scratching things off, but are you scratching off the most important things on that list? Maybe not. People by nature tend to want to do the simple, easy things that they enjoy doing. The more difficult things they tend to procrastinate and avoid. At the end of the day, you might find you had 10 items on the to-do list, there's only 2 left, but they may have been the more important ones. So keep in mind, we have to recognize, are we being productive or are we just getting things done? We will come back and talk about this concept a little bit more. Next point on your slide there, get information at scheduled times. As I alluded to earlier, there is limitless information and information overload today. I think that's a fair term. Information overload. It's important for you to schedule when precisely you take in your information. This means it doesn't interrupt you constantly, undermining your ability to be productive. So we will have to, as we continue, we're going to find out more about how to do that. And we'll talk more about it. To-do lists, which you see there, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about. Let's take a look at the next point. And again, we are going to come back and talk more about all these points. Important tasks versus urgent tasks. Do you know the difference? Multiple priorities. How many people are engaged in multiple priorities? Okay, we all are. We all are. I want to just tell you a little story. Okay? This is a story about a woman who owned a very beautiful crystal, an heirloom. It's been in her family for many, many years. She had somebody doing a little cleaning in the house, and accidentally this person knocked over that beautiful piece of crystal. It was now on the floor in hundreds of pieces, and the owner of the crystal was hysterical. She was crying hysterically over this piece of crystal. Well, what happened? Shortly afterwards, her husband came home, and she told her husband what happened, and it didn't seem to bother him. It didn't seem to faze him. 1 year later, the husband turned to his wife and said to her, "Do you remember that incident you got upset over a year ago?" And the wife said, "What are you talking about?" He said, you remember, don't you remember? Remember that piece of crystal, that beautiful piece of crystal that you were so in love with, that was smashed, and how hysterical you were? And she said to him, "That was a year ago, I already forgot about it." So the husband said to her, "The day it happened, when you told me about it, you know what I said? I asked myself a question. How am I going to feel about this 1 year from now?" And he thought about it. He said, a year from now, it's not going to really matter. So when it comes to urgent tasks, important tasks versus urgent tasks, your job is to ask yourself if it will matter 5 years from now whether you did a particular task or not. Will it matter 6 months from now, a week from now, 10 hours from now? You have to have some criteria on how to evaluate the necessity of that task by asking yourself over time, what are the consequences of either doing this or not doing it? And based on your answer, hopefully it will direct you to what needs to be done at that point in time. Okay, these are just different ways of thinking about our work and what we have to do in life and the goals that we want to try to accomplish and so on. By the way, 50% of your goals, of any person's goals in life, go unaccomplished. People have lots of goals, personal, professional, financial, etc., and nevertheless, less than half of our goals in a lifetime are completed. So we may want to give some thought to that and make sure we're focusing ourselves on what really needs to be done. Okay, the last point we have on this slide here is focus on the outcome, which again, as we said earlier, just because you're getting something done doesn't necessarily mean it matters. So another question you may want to ask yourself is the following. We draw up these to-do lists, and then we spend sometimes great amounts of energy working on something on that to-do list which may not be that important at that time. So the question you may want to ask yourself, am I giving $10 worth of energy to a 10-cent problem? Make sure your energy matches the importance of the task. All right? Okay, very good. Timing is everything, meaning we want you to implement some of the things you learned today. So let's keep that in mind as well. All right, let's take a look at the next slide, if we can. We'll scroll down. I think we're on it. Yeah, we have it on the board there. Categorizing your work. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Follow along on your slide. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever said the following, or have you ever heard anybody say the following? I can't get my work done because there is so much other work to do. Ever say that before? Ever hear anybody say that before? Okay. It might help us if we categorize our work in a way that allows us to form new productivity habits. So let's take a look at what we have here. We have something called predefined. You see that on your slide there? What do we mean by predefined? Again, we're trying to categorize our work a little bit differently. Predefined is as follows. It's the work we would be doing all day long if we weren't being interrupted. How many people can relate to that a little bit? Okay, the projects, the assignments, the things we're trying to focus on if we weren't interrupted. So that's what our predefined work is. In other words, we define each day the work we want to get done. And inevitably, what happens over the course of the day? Interruptions, changes, meetings are called, the phone rings, your email alert goes off, and we are bombarded with incoming information that interrupts our predefined work. Had we not had these interruptions, we would focus our time and energy on our predefined work. Okay, let's take a look at the ad hoc work. And that's exactly what I just said. The ad hoc work is the incoming calls, the instant messages from coworkers. You're basically doing work as it appears and choosing to do what is coming in as new input versus what was predefined. So even though you're involved in your predefined work, you drift off a little bit and you start responding to the incoming calls and interruptions and so on. This becomes a little bit of a problem because this is also your work. You do have to respond to phone calls, to emails, and so on, but it's interrupting you from your predefined work. Okay, let's keep that in mind. Let's go to the last bullet there. And this is called defining. And what defining work is the process of assessing new inputs and making decisions about what you need to do with it. In other words, you're involved in your predefined work, and now you have the ad hoc, or the interruptions, and what your job is to do now is to take sort of a pause. When you have new input coming in, new technology coming in, you have to decide what really needs to be done or handled at that point. So that's the way you have to sort of juggle through the day with these kind of things. Basically, the point is, all of this is your work. Yeah, go.
Some people, I've noticed, I'm not putting anybody on the spot here, but Rudy, for example, seems to have this uncanny ability to take something that seems kind of mushy and cloudy and chunk it down and get it real focused, real quick, and go right to the heart of the matter, and then, you know, it's like an assessment process in a way.
Right, right.
And then he gets it done instead of getting stuck and trying to figure out what it is.
Okay, good.
Could you explain at all how you do that, Rudy? Would that put you too much on the spot?
That's another process.
Okay, so he has that skill or that ability, and we can all learn that ability. It takes a little practice, a little time, but we have to, I think Bill used a good word, we have to assess And instead of instinctively, or better yet, go back to that word habit. Instead of habitually answering that phone, responding to that email, or getting sidetracked, we have to assess what is in our best interest to do at this point in time. If you don't do that, you know what's going to happen? If you don't take that pause and you don't try to challenge that situation, you're going to fall back on habit and routine, which may not be working for you. But if you could sort of interrupt your routine and ask yourself, do I really need to respond to that right now? Or should I stay focused on what I'm doing? Can that wait? It's an assessment process. And it takes time to really work those skills in or internalize those skills and make them become your new habits. But that's what we're here to really give some thought to today. We're asking you to give some thought to your routines, to your habits, to the way you handle time and technology and so on. Okay, good. Let's go a little further. We'll try to develop some other ideas for you. And what I'd like to ask you, though, is how much of your day, what percentage of your day is involved with these types of distractions or interruptions? What would you say? Yeah.
8 hours.
It's not that. I want to respond, I guess you didn't see my hand.
Yeah.
I've only got 6 years in government, but I got a whole load of a lifetime in private industry. And one thing that strikes me totally different here than every place else I've been, using the slide you were just on, here, you come in the morning, you have your predefined priority of the month or whatever.
Right.
And then a lot of ad hoc things come in, which are then the more important priority. I mean, in the last week, I've seen 3 different things. Each one is a, quote, national priority with a deadline. I think I've never seen it to that extent in private industry, but the difference between here and private industry, I think the goalposts move a lot more here than they do anyplace else.
Okay, that's a good point you're making, and obviously there are differences in industry, and even some of the things I'm telling you today, some things may apply to your organizational culture here, and other things may not apply. So you have to sort of tease out a little bit some of the things we're talking about and see if it can apply to what you do on a routine basis here. But it's a very interesting point that was just made, that the ad hoc or the interruption could sometimes take on a more significant priority than the defined work that you were focused on from the beginning of the day. So again, that's another area where you would have to make that assessment, and you would have to know where your time is most needed. And obviously it seems like in this industry that can happen kind of frequently and so on. Okay, let's take a look at the next slide, which is big picture versus little picture. Okay, what we're going to do on this slide is we're not going to cover all the bullet points. I want to just focus on daily. Basically, once you've collected and processed all the things you need to do, let's say on a particular day, it's necessary to try to organize them into the big picture, so you make sure your time is focused properly. By asking yourself, what is the value of me doing X instead of doing Y? I mean, you have to consciously stop and ask yourself that question. Otherwise, it's going to be maybe a knee-jerk response into one of the other areas. Once you've answered that, then you're sort of more focused on where your time should be spent. What I'd like to ask us to do now is, if we could draw up for ourselves in front of us right now, just draw up a short daily to-do list. I mean, things you may still need to do today. And try to include a few work-related things and possibly some off-the-job things as well. I'm not looking for a long list now, maybe 4 or 5 or items, 6 items at the most, of things you still need to do today on the job, as well as maybe some off-the-job things. Okay. How many people here actually draw up some sort of a to-do list every day, just by a show of hands? Whatever format you use. Okay, not everybody does it. I think it's a to-do list could be constructive if it's used properly. Now, for those of you that just made up your lists in front of you, as I said earlier, we sometimes feel a sense of accomplishment when we cross things off the list. What I'm going to ask you to do, instead of doing that, go back and prioritize that list. Use like an A, B, C system. A being a top priority, B being a average priority, and C being a low priority. Just put the appropriate letter next to each item on that list. Again, this is a daily list, what you need to do today. You could have more than one A on that list, but everything should not be an A, and everything should not be a C. There has to be a mix on that priority list. Okay. Now, once you've done this, that list takes on a new life. You don't just cross things off. You look to do the A's first, your B's, and then the C's. At the end of the day, if you're left with something, it shouldn't be an A. It should really be a C. But the next day, that C that was left over could change a priority. It could become a B or an A. So really, you have to upgrade or prioritize this list on a daily basis. Let me just tell you one thing. For those of you that do use a to-do list, can somebody tell me, when do you make up your to-do list? When do you typically do it? The night before. Okay. Any other times that you do it? The best time to do it is the night before or in the morning before you come into work. Because if you try to draw up that to-do list once you're in the thick of it, it's not going to happen. So if you can plan out your schedule a little bit before, the night before, the morning before, draw up your to-do list and come in with it prioritized, ready to use it, hopefully you will have a more productive day. Now, granted, ad hoc things will come in, distractions will come in, new priorities may come in. It may have to change, but at least you want something, you want to have come in with some footing and something to work with. Let's take a look at the next slide, please. The next slide is get information at scheduled times. Okay, great. Get information at scheduled times. Okay, believe it or not, you can learn to manage the information that is constantly coming at you. It just takes dedication and practice as well as thinking in a whole new way. So let's take a look at emails. Now, I'm going to go on record to say that many people here have already developed a habit on how they're going to handle their emails, how they're currently handling their emails. I'm going to suggest to you what the time management experts say may be a better approach. And if you like it, make use of it. Here's what they recommend. They recommend to turn off the email alert. Now again, some of these things are going to be sensitive to the nature of the work that you do. So if it doesn't apply or you can't do something, obviously that's understandable. But turn off the email alert. Why do they recommend doing that? Anybody have any idea? Yeah.
Less distraction.
Less distraction. If the email alert is on, most people can't help but read the email right away when they see an alert. What happens is that's going to pull them away from their defined work. And by the way, this can go on for weeks. They're constantly being pulled away from what they need to do. What they suggest doing is commit to checking your email every 2 hours and no sooner. Every 2 hours. In an average day, you'll be reading emails about 4 times a day and still getting back to people within 2 hours, which isn't bad. If you're reading those emails every 2 hours, you still have the opportunity to respond to people within 2 hours. And nevertheless, you're not getting constantly distracted. Okay, let's take a look at phone calls now. Now, I don't think there are any 911 operators in the room, am I right? A 911 operator has got to pick up the phone when it rings. Okay? Yeah?
We gotta pick up the phone when you
Okay. Okay, so we got a whole room full of 911 operators. A whole row, okay. Okay, a whole row, okay. Okay, so excluding that whole row there, okay, just for about 30 seconds, we're just going to exclude that row over there. So phone calls, again, this will depend on the type of job you have. But if you are working on something that is time sensitive, think twice before you answer a ringing phone, for those of you that have that privilege. Will it derail you and waste precious time in getting the other project done? Will you be able to tell the person at the end of the phone that you are in the middle of something and will have to call them back? These are the types of questions you should be asking yourself. Okay? It's just really rethinking how you do things, changing and uprooting habits. If you got that reflex response to answer every ringing phone, we all know that for most of us, every ringing phone is not a priority and maybe doesn't have to be answered. And by the way, this applies at home as well. You could adapt these skills to the off-the-job environment as well. Okay, let's talk about, by the way, you know what they do in some companies, some organizations? I don't know if you can do it here, probably not, but they have something called a quiet hour. Now the quiet hour means no coworker disturbs any other coworker. Nobody calls anybody, nobody text messages, nobody emails, nobody calls any meetings. And that hour is devoted towards getting your most important project done. So let's assume it's not feasible in the environment you work in. What about at home? I'm asking you to transfer some of these skills to off the job. You might get home after a busy day and say to yourself, you know something? I really don't make time for myself. Unless I have to go to the doctor or the dentist. Then I make the time to do that. I put it on my calendar and I make sure I get there. But what about the enjoyable, relaxing, pleasurable activities or hobbies that you would really like to do if you had the time? Well, I'm going to tell you something. Nobody out there is going to make the time for you. So if there's something that you really enjoy, you like to do, you got to put yourself on your calendar, and at home or when you're not working, you let family members know or people in your household know that from 9 to 9:30 at night is my quiet time, and I'm devoting that time to things that I want to do. Only interrupt me in an emergency. Try to make use of this quiet hour or concept and see if it doesn't add to the quality of your life. At least you know that you made time for yourself every day to do something meaningful. So you've been waiting for months and months to write the poetry you like to write, but you can't seem to find the time to do it, and now you've just carved out a half hour, 15 minutes, an hour for yourself every day to do something that you personally look forward to doing. All right, so keep that skill in mind. Let's take a look at the last point on this slide here, impromptu meetings. Did anybody ever have the experience where somebody comes over to your cube or your office and says, I just got to speak to you for a minute or two? And what winds up happening? An hour later, you can't get them out, right? They're still there. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how to handle this. As soon as somebody comes into your office or cube, the first thing you got to do is stand up. If you sit down, it's too inviting, because they're going to mimic your behavior. If you're sitting, they're going to sit. It's much harder to get a person out of your office if they're sitting versus if they're standing. So you got to make sure you stand up and say to them, they might say to you, I need to speak to you for a couple of minutes. And you can say, well, if it's only a couple of minutes, we can talk now, but I am involved in an important project, so I only got a couple of minutes. However, if it could wait, I'd be happy to sit down with you over lunch and we could talk for a half hour. So you got to think about that and see if these impromptu meetings are causing you a lot of stress by eating up a lot of your time. Okay, well, I want to open it up a little bit for a group discussion. Does anybody have any other ways to control the information or the technology that seems to be constantly coming at us on the job as well as off the job. Any other ideas that you are personally using to deal with all the incoming stimuli, information, technology that we have to deal with? Any other techniques or things that you've been successful with? Anybody have any other ideas? Nobody? Yeah.
Yeah, something I do which might be different than most, and it's based on what I'm involved in. If anybody looks at my computer at any point in time, they'll see at least 8 different windows that are minimized. So I think I'm really good at multitasking. I can start something on one thing, minimize it, start something on another, minimize it. I think that I've always done things like that, and I think it's effective using the technology we have.
Okay, great. So using the windows on the computer and using a minimizing method to try to multitask that way. Okay, good. Again, this may not work for everybody, but it's something that could work for some people. Does anybody else have any other thing they do to handle the technology? What do you do? Yeah, go ahead.
Caller ID.
Caller ID. Okay.
So I know when I have to answer the phone and when I don't.
Okay. How many other people make use of that? Raise your hands. Tell the truth now. Okay, good. The gentleman in the back there. Yeah.
I use an electronic organizer. We usually have that set up on a daily basis for tasks and memos and daily routines and appointments and phone calls and that sort of thing.
Okay, fine. So you work on getting that set up like...
Right.
Yeah, right, the day before or whatever. And
The
just,
day before, right.
okay, great. Okay, so an electronic organizer that he's gotten used to using for appointments and scheduling and things like that. Good. Any other things that have been helpful or not helpful? Okay, you got a few ideas there. I'm sorry, Bill. Yeah.
I'd like to ask Bill a question. Sure. You do a lot of ad hoc work, and you obviously prioritize it pretty well. Right? And I'd just like to know how you do that and still do your bigger project.
How?
Well, what are you
Tell
getting
you
the
what I
price?
did today, as an example. We have one of our major projects that absolutely positively will be done by December 31st, or plainly will fall out of the sky, or something like that. So what I did, and this is not an exaggeration, today I went into our lab where we had it. I had 4 different computers that I was working on simultaneously. I have my cordless phone that when it rings, I answer it. The good part is, on this phone, I have the equivalent to caller ID. And then I'm constantly running back and forth to my desk. I do a lot of ad hoc stuff, but I do a lot of stuff.
Okay. Okay, so again, everybody has a system that seems to work for them. And not every system, it's not one size fits all. I want you to understand that. Your personality, your work routine, your nature, the type of work that you do may call for other things that are going to work for you. So you've got to experiment a little bit and try to look at how you're doing things now. Okay, let's take a look at the, let's go to another slide. The doable to-do list. Okay, everybody has that in front of them? For those of you that do use to-do lists, whether you put it on an electronic organizer, however you lay it out, how many things typically are on that list? Can somebody give me a number of how many items are on that daily to-do list? How many? 15. 15? Who said 15? Raise your hand. Okay, somebody said half a dozen. Any other usual average amounts? 10. Okay. So here's what, again, here's what's recommended. They recommend limiting it to 6 items. 6 items. Consider just making a list with 6 items. Now, obviously, you may have more than 6 things to do that day. But they want you to start the list with 6 items. I'm assuming they're talking about your more important items. The point is that having a shorter to-do list is visually and psychologically more manageable. Some people can get overwhelmed if they have 15, 20, 30 items on that list. It's just too much. They just can't see themselves doing it. I can just tell you from my work experience, again, I've had work experience in many different environments. Many years ago, I worked for an organization, a franchise organization called Diet Center. Anybody ever hear of them? Okay. And I remember a client coming in one day, sitting down with the counselor, saying, I need to lose. The counselor said, how much weight do you want to lose? The woman said, 50 pounds. The counselor said, can you imagine yourself losing 50 pounds? The woman said, no. So instead of giving up on this client, the counselor immediately said, what about 20 pounds? The woman said, I can't see myself losing 20 pounds either. Can you see yourself losing 10 pounds? Not really. The counselor said, can you imagine going out and coming back next week 2 pounds lighter? Can you lose 2 pounds in a week? She said, 2 pounds I could see. In other words, if you can't visualize something psychologically, if you can't imagine yourself doing something, it ain't going to happen. So if you got a list that's too unwieldy, visually and psychologically, it's going to turn you off. Have a few items on the list. Limit it to 6. After you finish those 6, you add another 6 on. Another way to do the to-do list is categorize it by subsets. Some of the things on the list you might be able to do when you're by the computer. Other things you may do when you're home. Other things you may have to do in other... So try to categorize it by subsets. Home things, work things, errands, computer, phone, and write down on your to-do list under those subcategories or subsets. And then the last thing that's recommended is at the end of the week, take some time maybe on a Friday to do a weekly review of where you're sort of holding with your projects, with your assignments, with your tasks, your short-term things, your midterm, long-term things, and then this way you come in on Monday sort of like with a clean slate. You sort of have things in perspective and you can get ready for the next upcoming week. All right, let's go to the next slide, which is important tasks versus urgent tasks. Now, there is an English word. It only has 2 letters in it, but it's the most difficult word for people to say. Anybody know what word we're talking about? No.
No.
You don't know? That's the word. No. Okay, the word no. What makes the word no so difficult to say?
You got a problem with it.
It's confrontational, okay. Any other reasons what makes no so difficult?
Yeah.
Depends on who you have to say it to.
Depends on who you have to say it to. You may not be able to say it to everybody. Any other reasons why people have so much trouble saying no? Besides being confrontational, what are some other reasons?
They don't
Yeah.
want to look like they can't handle it.
Don't want to look like they can't handle something. You have a lady in the back there?
Yeah. Some of what she's saying is like, people don't want to say no because they don't want them to think that the issue, well, you brought a good thing about the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
It has a lot of connotation. You say no. Everybody wants to put more on their plate. That means they look more efficient. That means they don't lose their jobs. But we're going through a lot of transition here.
Right, okay.
So some people will never say no, 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 even though they're going into burnout.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, good. You're bringing a very good point. Any other reasons why? Yeah.
I think human nature for most people is they want to help people.
Okay.
So they don't want to say no.
Right. Okay, so maybe there's like an instinct, if you will, to want to help, to want to do something good for somebody. Also, you might be thinking, I may need that person to do something for me, and if I say no when I'm in need, that person may turn me down. Many reasons why we can't or don't like to say no or are uncomfortable saying no. But I want to tell you something very interesting. It could be to your disadvantage to not saying no. Can anybody here ever remember a time when you didn't say no and you felt bad about it afterwards? Just raise your hands if you ever had that experience. You should have said no, you didn't, and now you became committed to something which was going to cause you a lot of stress or time that you didn't have. Now, I want to tell you something. You could say no diplomatically. Now, obviously, as Bill brought up, depending on who's asking you to do something, there may not be too much wiggle room, but it doesn't have to be a flat-out no. It could be a no with an explanation. In other words, you might say to a person, I really don't have the time right now to help you with what you need. However, could it wait a few days? A few days from now, my schedule lightens up a little bit, and then I can do it. But if it needs to be done right now, I'm afraid if I say yes, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm going to wind up not getting it done because my plate is so full. Most people will understand that instead of just cutting them off with a no. So you could give a no with an explanation. That might work. You might be doing yourself and that person more of a service by saying no than saying yes. But I know it's circumstantial and you have to weigh, you know. Also, if somebody's pressuring you for a decision, tell them, let me sleep on it, I'll give you an answer tomorrow. You don't have to answer on the spot in most situations. Think about it and see if you want to commit to it, see if you have the time and the resources to commit to it. Keep that in mind as well. If we look at the important tasks versus urgent tasks, we have a yes and a no area. If there are things that we have to do and they don't take up that much time, a couple of minutes, try to do them. What about delegating? Can we delegate an assignment, a project, either on the job or off the job to somebody else? What about deferring? Sometimes something has to be done in a couple of months. Are you set up with a system or a file now where you can defer a project and then come back to it when the time gets closer? And then you have the no side. If there's an email you really don't need anymore, trash it. Don't keep it around. So these are things that you have to ask yourself on the no side and know what to do with these things as well. And set up files for yourself or things. If you reference, if you need to store something that might be a good reference for you, you can set up a file alphabetically. And let's say you come across an article on ergonomics. You want to hold on to it. Put it in the E folder for ergonomics. So you got to set up these kind of systems for yourself as well. Okay, let's just go down a couple more slides. There's one slide called Focus on the Outcome. I'd like you just to read the quote on that slide in front of you, Focus on the Outcome. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you, interesting quote there. If we can just turn to the slide which says, timing is everything. Okay, this will be a little homework assignment, just to fill in this page on your own. Who, what, when, where, why, how. I think that's a good page for you to fill in. Focus on the outcome there. Meaning, who will you discuss some of the things you learned with today? What idea from today specifically will you try to implement? Okay? If you want to fill in one of these things now just to have something to work with. When? On what date will you begin doing this? Have a clear goal in mind. Where? Is the tip or technique you've chosen something you will do at home, at work, or in both environments, or somewhere else? Why do you want to make this change? How will it help you? And how will you do it? Okay, so try to work maybe independently or on your own to try to fill in some of this information. But I think I once heard that if you learn a new skill or a new idea and you implement it within 48 to 72 hours, it's going to be part of your routine. If 72 hours pass and you didn't implement the change, it's not going to happen. So in order to maximize the benefits of today's programming, if you could leave here even with one new idea or technique or something you want to implement, I would try it in the next 48 to 72 hours. What I'm going to ask you to think about right now is self-care. As a healthcare professional, I often believe that the better we take care of ourselves, the more energy we have, the more productive we are, and the better we can handle stress, and so on. So what I mean by self-care is, how much sleep do you get? Do you think you eat well? Do you exercise? If you're not doing some of these things, it's going to be a lot harder to be productive. It's going to be a lot harder to multitask for those that are still multitasking. So you might just do a little assessment on just some lifestyle routines, nutritional status, sleep habits, exercise, managing stress. And if you feel you're weak in one of those areas, you may want to bolster yourself a little bit, because even an extra half hour, an hour of sleep at night can bring somebody very different to the workplace, and so on. So I would give some thought to some of these ideas as well. I'd like to finish off a little story. The author is anonymous, and then we'll give you a few minutes to fill out the evaluation form. The story is about a college philosophy professor. And one day this college professor walks into his class with a large jar, a big wide mouth, open jar, empty jar. The professor goes into his drawer, takes out some rocks, and fills the jar with large rocks all the way up to the top. He asked the class, "Is that jar full?" And the class said yes. The professor went back into his drawer, took out small pebbles, and put pebbles into the jar, and sure enough, the pebbles found their way into the jar and filled it even more. He asked the class again, "Is the jar full?" Class said it's full. Well, this professor went back into his drawer and he took out sand from the beach. And he put that into the jar, and sure enough, the sand found its way into the little crevices and filled the jar all the way up. Finally, everybody agreed the jar is full. The professor turned to the class and said, "This jar represents your life." He said the rocks are the big things in your life, the important things. Your spouse, your family, your friends, your children, your health. He said the little pebbles are the less important things, your iPod, your computer, etc. And then he said the sand is the real meaningless stuff in life that doesn't really have any meaning at all. He said, if I would have filled the jar up with sand first, there wouldn't be room for anything else. So he says, you got to make time for the important things in your life. So I'm hoping that you'll leave here today thinking about how you can do that. And I want to thank everybody for attending. I think you deserve a round of applause. Give yourself a big hand.